So I want to talk to you guys about pretty much everything I learned over the last 14 years about operating and angel investing in emerging markets. Now, what's interesting is if you think or look about my background, it's actually not logical necessarily that I would be the one to talk to you about that. And it goes to the point of the amount of serendipity there is in terms of life in general. I mean, I'm originally French. I came here for college. I went to Princeton, and then I worked for McKinsey & Company in New York. And as an entrepreneur, decided to take American ideas first to France. And so you would have thought that my expertise through life would probably take me to the US and to France, maybe Europe, but not much further than that. And kind of randomly, 1 year into that experience, as I was running the eBay of France and Southern Europe, I was introduced by a McKinsey friend of mine to a team of great guys from Latin America, most of whom were from Argentina, who were trying to build an eBay for Latin America, which was a company called Deremate. And as life and luck would have it, that's how I met actually my current partner and co-founder of OLX, which is Alec Oxenford. And I also met that way my current angel investing partner, Jose Marin. And as life again would have it, we started working together with Deremate. I gave them the business plan and the technology from Auckland to launch, and it ran its course and was eventually sold to Mercado Libre in 2005. But post-Auckland, I came back to the US, and I did a reverse arbitrage. I brought mobile content and mobile ideas from Europe to the US, and that company went from 1 million in sales in 2002 to 5 million in 2003 to 50 million in 2004 to 200 million in 2005. So it grew from 1 to 200 million in 4 years, and then I sold it. And started looking or thinking through what to do next, and that's when, probably again, serendipitously, as I realized that there were opportunities for arbitrage on a global basis, I reconnected with my friend Alec. And we built a company called OLX, which is now in 96 countries in 51 languages. We're basically the Craigslist of the rest of the world. We realized that there was a fundamental transition happening from classifieds from newspapers, paid print classifieds, to paid vertical classifieds in cars, real estate, jobs, to free horizontal classifieds. And that transition had happened already in the U.S. and was happening in Western Europe, but for the most part, it had not yet happened in the emerging markets. Now, what's interesting is we didn't actually set out to go for the emerging markets. We opened the site. You know, sometimes we're in VCs who are saying you should only focus everything in one country, but we had no idea where it would work. So we launched in basically 100 countries, and it just so happened that it took off, especially in 4 markets, which are Brazil and India, and then to a lesser extent Pakistan and Portugal and across Latin America. Now, what's interesting at the same time is a few years after that, and I'm actually taking a step back, OLX today is about over 100 million unique visitors a month. We have offices in Argentina, in Brazil, in South Africa, in India, and we're currently opening or building presence in Nigeria, Pakistan, and Vietnam. So we're very strong emerging markets focus. Now, on the angel investing side, my partner, Jose, almost the same thing happened. We started investing in the US and in Western Europe and started realizing that based on secular long-term macroeconomic trends in terms of population growth, GDP per capita growth, e-commerce penetration, internet penetration, there seemed to be a number of markets bubbling up where there were clear opportunities for investment. So we started investing in Brazil and Russia, and then one thing led to the other, and we started investing globally. And if you look at our portfolio, we've made 106 investments, and about half of them were outside of the U.S. And most of those have been in Brazil, Russia, and other emerging markets. There's still some proportion of France in there, mostly because that's where I started investing. And Brazil should be bigger than that. It just so happens that recently I had 4 exits out of Brazil. And if you look at our portfolio, some of the coolest companies in the portfolio are actually from emerging markets. So Viajanet, which is an Expedia for Brazil, which is doing hundreds of millions in bookings, or Wikimart, which is a Rakuten / e-commerce site for Russia, which is doing extraordinarily well, or OK2Go, which is a booking.com for Russia. What's also interesting is our best exits have also come from emerging markets. And so if you look at the companies that have accounted for most of our successes, I mean, the very best ones have come from Brazil. And though we've also had good exits in Russia and elsewhere. Now, what's more important than the history is what have we learned, what have we observed in the past. So this is actually the first observation, which is by now common knowledge. This is like the trade. Everyone knows that this is happening, that ideas that work in one market work in other markets. And so if you want, this is becoming a very crowded trade. So this is really, from a business model perspective, the top business models in every country are basically the same. And so you see different companies operating them, but in every market you're seeing classified sites, auction sites, big horizontal e-commerce sites, vertical actually, e-commerce sites as well, search engines, et cetera. So we're in, and social media. So the business models are the same. And this is something that has now become very common. I mean, you see Rocket Internet copying ideas right and left, but you're also seeing young entrepreneurs copying ideas much earlier than ever before. I mean, when Hotel Tonight launched, I guess a year ago, almost immediately you saw copies of Hotel Tonight emerge in Europe and around the world. And the same has been true of all ideas, not just proven ideas. Maybe more important than the fact that ideas are actually transferable and work across markets is, how do you execute on those ideas given the idiosyncrasies of these markets? And the reality is those markets are very different. And operating in emerging markets is fundamentally different from operating in other markets. I'll give you a few actually specific examples. So if you're in Russia, it's actually really, really hard to get an e-commerce through payments and your delivery to work. Payments is through cash, so everything is cash on delivery, which has a number of interesting ramifications, not to mention that it costs more in a COD model to actually collect funds than if you were doing online payments. Your delivery network doesn't work particularly well. I mean, I was talking to Oscar from QPVIP, who was telling us that he had to build his own delivery service. And he realized how unproductive his drivers were, and if he didn't use his own delivery service, people were actually stealing the products, sometimes stealing the products and the money from the cash on delivery. And so he decided to build his own, and at least that was solved. But he was like, they were doing 2 deliveries a day. And he started wondering why, and traffic is notoriously bad in a place like Moscow, but still 2 or 3 was too low. And in a moment of brilliant insight, he ripped out the passenger seats in the delivery vehicles. Productivity doubled. I mean, so basically his drivers were like playing taxi even for like $40 or $20, even though they had hundreds of thousands of dollars of merchandise in the back. Now, the funny thing is, beyond removing the passenger seats, they then put like spiky, pointy things that if you sat there, you were going to die. Productivity doubled again. So it goes to show some of the idiosyncrasies of these markets. Now, if you go to Latin America, I think the bigger idiosyncrasy is probably around the legal environment in terms of creating companies, hiring people, firing people, and frankly, how the likelihood of being sued. When I was running Zingy, an assistant of mine actually committed fraud. She started signing checks using my signature. I mean, I didn't sign them. She signed for me, which is a federal offense, actually. And when we found out, we called the cops. The cops came in the company, arrested her, and sent her to jail. And eventually, obviously, we fired her, and it was very easy in a way. Okay, someone committed fraud, we fire them. We had a case similar to that in Argentina in OLX, and we documented that the person had been stealing from the company. We took pictures. We basically documented and proved it beyond any concept of reasonable doubt. And we could still not even fire her, let alone get her arrested by the cops. I mean, because the labor laws are such, it's really, really hard to fire people, including people that in this case were clearly fraudulent. Brazil is another case in point. It's very easy to sue. It's almost free to sue. And so we big, evil, bad companies are seen as sources of capital for people who don't have money. And 95%, maybe even 99% of the lawsuits OLX has faced have been in Brazil. And people will sue you for the most frivolous reason. It's like, well, someone said something bad about me online. And even though you're not the one who said it, you should be responsible because you have money. And if you don't take these seriously, and if you don't fight every and single one of them, really bad things can happen. I mean, one of our competitors didn't take these frivolous lawsuits seriously, and it escalated, went to court, and eventually some random judge in some backwater place took his domain away, and his business disappeared overnight. And so there are a lot of idiosyncrasies about operating in emerging markets that make it interesting. A few more points. People keep talking about how globalized the world is, but the reality is it's much less globalized than you think. Only 2% of people go to college outside the country they were born in. Only 3% of people in the world live in a country other than the one they were born in. less than 20% of venture capital is invested cross-border, and that's including places like Europe, where you would have thought that the numbers would be higher than that. Beyond that, even though seed capital has become more available over the years as these internet ecosystems have brought up, it's been really hard to get Series A money in most markets, in most emerging markets, for a number of reasons. And so getting 3 to 5 million or 3 to 7 million Series A is very, very difficult. And capital, which is also a CoinJoin point, is fickle in the sense that sometimes VCs get really excited in a category or a country or a region, and all of a sudden there is capital available for a period of time in Russia and Brazil or whatever, but they can change their mind. Oh, it's far and complicated, the labor laws are more difficult than expected, and they lose interest. And so the availability of ongoing capital is far from being clear. And maybe last but not least, from a point, it's really hard to get exits, and it's really and when you do get them, they can take a long time. So all of these have consequences for how you operate. So one is hiring. When you're hiring people in emerging markets, we both at OLX and as investors, when we're investing in entrepreneurs, it's somewhat of a different profile than the people we back in the U.S. The average age of the entrepreneurs we back in the U.S. is about 25. And we have absolutely no qualms about backing a 22-year-old graduate from one of the Ivy League schools. Because in the U.S., everything works. I can take a 22-year-old from Princeton or Harvard, and if he wants to do an e-commerce startup, no problem. He doesn't need to know anything about logistics because he can use a 3PL to handle it for him. He doesn't need to know anything about payments. There are payment professors. He doesn't need to know too much about supply chain management or inventory management, because his suppliers will give him a real-time feed with their inventory, and will do drop shipping or consignment. So the only thing that 22-year-old needs to know is, okay, I have a sense of the category he wants to go after, how he's going to do his merchandising and his marketing, and he's off for the gates. None of this works in Russia. In Russia or in Brazil, your suppliers don't even know what they have in stock. And they might give you a feed, but they don't update it. And so when you sell the product, you might realize you're not capable of fulfilling. So let's say that 50% of your fulfillment doesn't happen. You pissed off your buyers, and at the same time, you doubled your customer acquisition costs because you thought you were selling, let's say, 2% of the time, and you're only selling 1% of the time. Some of the, I guess, other consequences is, so as a result of that, the people we're hiring in emerging markets are older. They typically have operating experience. They've been to business school. And so they're like, let's say, 30 years old on average, but much more experienced. Beyond that, trust is much more of an issue. So we make sure that we do much more thorough reference checking, and we install controls in the company that go beyond traditional controls. Our auditors didn't catch the person stealing us in Argentina. They thought everything was going fine. It's our internal controls that allowed us to figure it out. Beyond that, taking into consideration the other things I said in terms of how long it takes, how low the valuations are at exit, below 30 million for most. If you're investing, you want to be very thoughtful about the valuation in which you're investing, and so you need to be extraordinarily price sensitive. Given how risky or how much luck there is in terms of getting exits, you want to have a portfolio approach. You want to invest in many companies, and you want to be investing in ideas that are capital efficient, because follow-on capital is not going to be available. So based on these lessons, we've actually come up with a very specific strategy to implement it as investors. And here I'm talking about more Jose and my activities as angel investors and my activity as an operator, but the reality is the same underlying principles and philosophies that we apply to investing apply to operating. So what we decided to do is invest from a strategic perspective, in large markets globally, because in these large markets domestically, you already have a customer base that works. And so we did the US, we did Germany, we did the UK and France, but then we extended it to Brazil, Russia, and more recently we added Turkey, and now we're looking at places like Indonesia. We never take business model risk and market risk simultaneously. So we'll do new innovative ideas in the U.S. where even if you screw up, it doesn't matter because the market is so big, you might actually still be able to succeed and get something out of it. And we'll do ideas that are proven, which for us means 100 million in revenues and profitable or a path to profitability in the emerging markets. We obviously only back people that we love and trust, and because of our core expertise, and because we have day jobs as operators, we only focus on consumer-facing models that we understand. And so specifically marketplaces, travel, and e-commerce. So going through highlighting the portfolio approach, I mean, we've done 106 investments, but most of those have come in the last 3 years. So we increased the number of investments in the last few years. The way we seed or source deals is, I mean, now we've already backed over 200 entrepreneurs, and so they send us other entrepreneurs. They come back for their second deals or gigs, and then we have a bunch of angels that we work with and VCs that we work with, like Jeremy at Bessemer, who send us deals that either where our expertise is relevant or maybe it's too early stage for them. And then we have a process. I mean, we will decide literally in 1 hour whether we invest. Do we like the team? Do we like the product? And we expect it to be live. Does the pitch in terms of business size, et cetera, meet our 10 business selection criteria, which are the 9 business selection criteria that I personally use to select ideas, and at a 10th, which is we expect the site to be live and the unit economics to be understood, and do we like the deal terms? And deal terms for us is not just the price, and we are price sensitive, and we expect very low pre-money valuations, but also, especially if it's a note, what happens in case the company sells, let's say, before the note is converted? What happens when the note is due and a Series A hasn't happened? So some of the intricacies of those deal terms matter a lot, not to mention we want our rights. Okay. So, okay. I'm not sure the microphone.
Hello, hello. Okay, now it works. Sorry for that.
So quick, I guess, performance results. Made 106 investments, deployed 6.6 million total as an investor, and that's just my performance, excluding Jose. Jose has almost the same performance, if not better, actually. We've had 21 exits. Actually, one more exit is happening this week, so and it's also successful, and we have the opportunity for another one. But of these 21, we've had 14 successful, 7 where we made money, 7 where we lost money. And of those, I invested 1.8 and made 9. So seems to work reasonably well from a philosophy or as lessons that we've learned. So that's basically it, and I'd like to open it up for questions.
Hello. Okay. Questions? Over here.
Fabrice, as an investor with a clearly kind of global perspective, I think a lot of folks in the room are from different parts of Latin America. How do you see not only Brazil, but sort of the rest of Latin America fitting into the global kind of opportunity set for investors like you?
So we've made a deliberate choice to invest only in large markets. So for us, in Latin America, it really means Brazil. It doesn't mean that these companies don't eventually go and expand beyond Brazil, but if you look at the e-commerce market specifically, Brazil is actually bigger than the rest of Latin America combined. And even though from a, let's say, a macroeconomic perspective, places like Mexico have the wind in their back right now. The issue is the ecosystems are not yet very robust, and I mean the internet ecosystems. So today you can get seed capital in pretty much across Latin America. I mean, you see in Chile with the Startup Chile environment, and there's a very thriving entrepreneurial community that is happening right now. I mean, in Peru, in Mexico, and in Argentina itself. The issue is it's really hard to get follow-on capital. The domestic markets are small, and it's hard to get exits. And so if you're an American company or even a Brazilian company, usually it's so much easier to just grow faster in the market you're in. And if you're going to go abroad, before you get to a place like Mexico or Argentina or Chile, it's so far down your priority list, it doesn't happen. And so even though we would like to help the ecosystems there, the reality is today, if you're a successful seed startup in Chile, we tell you, first of all, don't go just after the domestic market. You soon need to start thinking globally. Go after the Brazilian market or go after the U.S. market and move to those ecosystems. That's where the capital is. That's where the talent is. The model I'd like to apply for these countries is really Sweden. Sweden, when you think about it, has a disproportionately large number of successful global startups. I mean, from Spotify to Rap to Klarna. And the domestic market is so small that these companies build from the ground up knowing they need to go global. And if I was an entrepreneur in any of these secondary markets in Latin America, I'd actually would think that the domestic market per se is not sufficient if you want to build something big. You actually have to think immediately with a much more global and broader perspective.